It was just after 1 a.m. when Flight 370 of Malaysian Airlines carrying 239 people from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia to Beijing, China, made their last contact with the outside world. It was a simple message from the Malaysian air control as the plane was moving towards Vietnamese airspace. Good night, Malaysia 370. After that, MH370 disappeared from radar screens. Confused if there had been a misunderstanding at the border crossing, officials didn't realize the plane was missing for 18 whole minutes. As soon as it became clear that something was not all right, Kuala Lumpur's Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center was alerted that an aircraft and its passengers might be in mortal danger. This took place around 6 a.m., more than 4 hours after the plane disappeared. Search and rescue efforts were concentrated in the South China Sea, where the plane was assumed to have been lost. But despite more than 30 aircraft and ships being part of the effort, there was no sign of the airplane. It was almost as if the plane and the 239 people on board had vanished into thin air. From satellite and radar data analysis, shocking new truths emerged about the plane's flight path. As it turned out, almost immediately after the goodnight message, the plane changed its course rapidly. It made a turn to the southwest and then flew back over the Malay Peninsula. The plane then banked around the island of Penang, before heading northwest up the Strait of Malacca and out across the Andaman Sea. All in all, this whole maneuver took more than an hour. By this point, Malaysian authorities were desperately trying to contact the airplane, but a search and rescue hadn't been launched yet. So, what was the plane doing so far from its intended flight path? The most shocking revelation from the radar data was the fact that the plane cruised on autopilot for hours before it ran out of fuel and plunged into the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles away from the initial search area. What was the reason behind this detour? Was it a case of pilot error, equipment failure, or something far more sinister? At this point, the team searching for the plane had no idea about this detour. In fact, the original search operation was thousands of miles away from the actual last location of the plane. New information revealed that the Malaysians knew about the change in flight path early on, and withheld that information even as rescuers wasted precious hours and days searching the wrong area. A Malaysian military airbase actually spotted the plane through their radar away from its intended flight path, but decided not to investigate considering it a friendly aircraft. This information could have helped trace the aircraft earlier and maybe even shed some light on why the plane deviated so much. If the data is to be believed, there was no way the abrupt change was unintentional. The sharp turns and sustained altitudes suggest that the plane was being captained manually. So why did the pilot do this? Multiple theories abound, but some suggest that the captain Zahir Ahmad Shah had been facing some personal issues. His profile suggests that he was likely clinically depressed, so maybe this was a case of murder-suicide. In that case, it must be noticed that most of the passengers and crew on board had probably passed away long before the dramatic last moments of Flight MH370. Flight data shows that shortly after the initial turn, the plane's electronic systems were disabled, including the cabin air pressurization system, meaning the passengers would have been knocked out and passed away one by one at the immense altitudes. The cockpit has its own supply of oxygen, so the two pilots may have held out for hours or until the inevitable crash. There's a lot that we don't understand about the tragedy, and even though there are a lot of theories, there's no denying that this was a great tragedy. Once we accept that this failure was not likely unintentional, we are forced to face some very uncomfortable questions. Why did the pilot change course? Was the plane hijacked? Or is this a case of murder-suicide? Sadly, as long as the wreckage remains at the bottom of the sea, finding answers is going to be very difficult. On that note, we end today's video. Let us know what you think about this in the comments.